Well, he's just one of two Liberal MPs elected in the province of Alberta in the lone red riding in the blue sea that is Calgary. So there's a lot of focus and a lot of pressure on Corey Hogan. He joins us next on The Line, Alberta. All right, well, welcome to The Line, Alberta. My name is Rob Breakenridge. Great to have you along with us. Very much looking forward to our next conversation here with someone who has had, I would argue, maybe a life-altering year so far in 2025, largely in a good way probably, but a lot of focus, responsibilities, and some prominence as the newly elected Liberal MP for Calgary Confederation, and also now as Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, Corey Hogan, joining us here on The Line, Alberta. Corey, so great to have you with us.
Rob, great to be here. It's good to be in this format again. It's been a minute.
Yeah, no kidding. Like I say, it's been a whirlwind year for you. Let's talk a bit about the election, and I guess your decision to run as a candidate in the election. Was this kind of your idea, like something you wanted to do, or was this maybe a combination of that and a lot of voices perhaps urging you to run?
Yeah, I mean, I think like a lot of Canadians, I was looking around in January and February and saying, what the hell is happening? This is all very concerning. What's going on globally? What's going on with the United States? Where is our country going to go? And I for sure was not thinking of running at that point, but I was definitely trying to get more active in those conversations. I started writing more long form. There was this one moment in January, it was really, really cold, like one of those like minus 25 days. And I had my then 6-year-old son out with me mounting a Canadian flag to the side of the house. And, you know, the moment kind of seizes you a little bit. And kind of concurrently, the Liberals were going through their own renewal. And It's no surprise, I've said in a lot of places, I hadn't really considered myself a Liberal in a long time, right? But I sure liked what Mark Carney was offering. And so I texted a friend right around when Mark Carney won, I guess. And the polls at that point didn't show the Liberals leading, but they were looking a lot better. And I texted that friend who worked for Mark Carney and said, oh, your guy's looking pretty good. You know, I mean, you might have something here. And he said, oh, you should run. And I said, absolutely, I will not run. That's not going to happen. But the idea gets kind of planted and you start to think about it. And then as the election got closer, a few people, both locally and nationally, were encouraging me to at least think about it. And well, I ultimately decided before the election I would pass. Really the moment where it all changed was the week into the election, the candidate in my home riding of Calgary Confederation got dropped by the Liberal Party.
Yeah, that's right.
And I got a call from the election chair for Alberta, a woman named Kathy, who I've known for years. And she said, hey, you told me before when you weren't going to run that one of the main reasons was it wasn't in your home riding. Well, if that wasn't bullshit, this riding is now open again. You've got like 4 hours. Tell me what you want to do. So, So rapid conversation with my wife, who it wasn't the first time because we talked about it before. And then we're off to the races. And I've sort of been on a roller coaster ever since, Rob, as you said.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, it's funny. I know the Liberals were a little more optimistic about their chances in Calgary or even in Alberta, more broadly speaking. I don't know if Calgary Confederation was seen as one of those sort of toss-up or swing ridings. I mean, Len Weber won fairly comfortably in the last election. But obviously with Trudeau gone, you know, everything going on at the time, different kind of circumstances. But how did you view your chances in that riding?
Well, yeah, I mean, you're right. Like, I think if you were going to stack up the ridings in Calgary and say, what are the most likely ones to go Liberal before that election, maybe you would have put Calgary Confederation fourth, maybe third, if you were a real optimist about it. Mm-hmm. But certainly it wasn't like the riding that everybody was watching there. But it is my home. Like I've lived in Calgary Confederation most of my adult life when I haven't been up in Edmonton doing government jobs there. And, you know, my sense has always been it's a very progressive place. And if there was going to be a durable breakthrough for the Liberal Party, it was probably going to come from a place like Calgary Confederation. Because you got to keep in mind, provincially, I mean, it was electing New Democrats and Liberals before it was cool, right? Like it was that one area of Calgary you could count on to do that. Municipally, it's had progressive councillors. Really, federal was the was the odd one out. And so, I've always been more bullish on progressive opportunity and Confederation. But, what really I think became the reason that it was I think appealing, and I'll be candid, I wouldn't have run if I didn't think I had a good chance, was that the Conservatives nominated a candidate, good enough fellow on a personal level, Jeremy Nixon, but really quite out of step with sort of the middle of the road vibe of Calgary Confederation. So it did seem like there was an opportunity there.
So once the votes were counted, and it was a close race to be sure, you realize that you're heading to Ottawa, but you're the only one from Calgary. And like you say, I mean, there were maybe some other winnable ridings. The Liberals did increase their overall vote total pretty substantially in Alberta. But once you realized that it was going to be just you representing Calgary in the Liberal caucus, one other Liberal MP in Edmonton, of course, what was that realization? To feel like all of a sudden now maybe there's going to be a little more focus or a little more pressure on you?
For sure. I mean, I remember really distinctly on election night feeling really personally pretty happy, pretty excited. I was thrilled for my volunteers that they got to pull this off and we got to do this, but also thinking, oh man, just short of a majority government, all of these seats in Calgary we thought we would win. I didn't think there were very many scenarios in which I won and we didn't bring along at least one or two additional Liberal seats in Calgary, to your point about not necessarily Confederation being the one that was, at the top of everybody's list. So that, I'm not really sure that it's like I felt a pressure about that, but I definitely felt a disappointment. It'd be crazy if I didn't, frankly. And it certainly changed a bit of the calculation in my own head as to what was required for me and what I was going to have to do next.
Yeah. And your approach to politics, you mentioned some of your background, and you do have some history going further back in the Liberal Party, but you worked in government under both the NDP in Alberta, under the UCP in Alberta. So how has that kind of shaped your view of or your approach to politics then?
In some ways, it's like a different seat at the circus, right? But, so I know a lot of the lingo. I know a lot of the beats. I'll tell you, cabinets and caucuses are the same everywhere. They're the same for the New Democrats. They're the same for the Conservatives. They're the same for the Liberals, I now know. And they have the same challenges and whatnot. But it's for sure different when it's you. Yeah, I find myself all the time driving my staff crazy with things that politicians used to drive me crazy about when I was, an official. And I was an official for the government of Alberta. I also worked for the Liberal Party in a different life, and I was a pundit for a long time too in politics. So it's been eye opening, but maybe not in the way of like, wow, I'm learning all of these new things I didn't know before. But I think more in like the beats and how it feels to have those things happen to you, and what it looks like, and how you die a little inside when the thing goes wrong that you used to think was not a very big deal when you were the support staff rather than the candidate on the ballot.
Yeah. Well, and since the cabinet was named, I mean, obviously we got the major projects office coming to Calgary, and we can get into all of that. But I know there was some eyebrows raised at the time. Well, here we got a Liberal MP in Calgary. He's not in cabinet. I mentioned the responsibility you've taken on as a parliamentary secretary, but I don't know, was that as big a deal as some made it out to be?
Yeah, the reality is there's like 170 of us in the government caucus, 169, I think. We all want to be in cabinet. I wanted to be in cabinet, of course. That's the show. That's where you get to, do as much good as possible and, really be involved in the conversations of the day. But the simple matter is you can't all be in cabinet. And there's not a series of decisions you can make that are going to satisfy every region of the country. And you have to look at it as like a great honor and additive. But truly the most important job, the one I signed up for, was to represent Calgary Confederation at an important time. And that is my most important job. So, I got a lot of texts after, I got a lot of phone calls after, how you feeling about all of this? To be honest, I felt better than I thought I would feel when I wasn't, put into cabinet. It wasn't as big of a deal. And you sort of realize very quickly, because you're in a caucus where the vast majority of you are not in cabinet, that you're not the only one in that boat. And you start to understand some of the pressures that drive that too. The other thing I'd say is just, like, I've been there supporting premiers trying to build cabinets. Like, you just got to make choices at the end of the day. And they're not always fun. They're certainly not fun for the people they happen to all of the time. But cabinet making is a tricky art. It includes balancing regions, demographics, all of it. And sometimes that's just how it goes.
So you're working with Tim Hodgson, the Natural Resources and Energy Minister, and I think he's kind of surprised a lot of people out here. Been a bit of a breath of fresh air, perhaps even. Now we'll see what the follow through looks like. But what have you made of him so far?
I mean, Tim's great. So the first time I really spent any serious time with Tim was when he came out to Calgary to give a speech to the chamber about just in general his philosophy and his approach to energy and natural resources. Right from the jump, I mean, he was very collaborative. He involved people. He had sincere conversations with CEOs and all of that, sure, but also like me, like he was asking me what I thought, where I thought the government should maybe, change focus, double down focus, all of that. And the thing I'd say about him is like he's just elevated the thoughts around deal making and how you get stuff done, because that was his past life. And he is so kind of gracious with acknowledging what he doesn't know or the limits of his knowledge or where he can benefit from other people. And his reach out in Calgary has been, I think, really, really pretty impressive. So, I mean, I like the guy a lot. One of the things about being a parliamentary secretary is your job, besides just popping up in the House of Commons and answering at committees, is really totally up to the minister. And there are some parliamentary secretaries who, like a few weeks after being appointed, hadn't really even had a substantive conversation with their minister. I'm not knocking them. Like every ministry is different, but Tim was treating me and the other Parl Sec for Energy like absolute partners, talking about things that we could do, carving off parts of the department he was asking us to be responsible for. In my case, forestry and of course the West. And he has been nothing but a great guy to work with. He really is, as his first impression came off, which is just a let's get stuff done, no nonsense, no ego, we're here to do a job kind of guy.
Yeah, and I think we seem to be on the cusp with some of these big announcements. I mean, just on Friday, of course, we had part of this industrial strategy outlined by the Prime Minister, and I guess more to come. Is that your sense of where everything is at here? Yeah,
well, we're rapidly approaching the start of the new parliamentary session. The Prime Minister and Minister Hodgson and Minister LeBlanc are all on the record saying that they're trying to get that projects of national interest list, or at least the first part of it, out in like right away, like before we go back or imminently thereafter. So we're talking, like days, not even weeks at this point, probably, until there's a list. And so that's all happening. Lots of stuff behind the scenes, many, many things going on. It's been a really busy summer, and I think you're going to start to see some of the flesh on the bones over the next bit here, because you do all of this stuff and then you bring it out into the world. So there's more to come, and there's more even, on Friday that was announced.
Yeah. We mentioned the Major Projects Office. It's going to be headed up by Dawn Farrell. It's going to be based in Calgary, which, I think is a big deal. Do you know Dawn Farrell at all? Have you worked with her before?
I haven't. I know her reputation, obviously.
Yeah.
I've been in meetings with her in various lives that I've lived, but no, I mean, we're not on each other's Rolodex. But I think it's a total win for the city, the province, and the country, and not necessarily in that order, because she's definitely somebody who knows how to get things done. I know for a lot of people who are not from Calgary, they hear Dawn Farrell, they hear TMX, they think, oh, she's an oil and gas person. But of course, here in Alberta, she's an energy person. She's an electricity person is how she's generally perceived. She worked for BC Hydro too. And she really knows how to get stuff done. And she's generally done that by being very pragmatic, but also being very mindful of some of the counter concerns that might be out there. And so she's been a good partner to Indigenous people. She's worked with environmentalists on their concerns. And so when I think of somebody who's charged with helping us build things as a country in a way that unlocks our economy, but like in a, what I would consider a Canadian way, like you're not going to do better than Dawn. I mean, it's fantastic. And I was thrilled that she was willing to take on this role. And of course, very happy it was in Calgary. That's something that I'm strongly supportive of.
Yeah. Well, I mean, got warm reaction or reception from Alberta's premier. She spoke quite highly of Dawn Farrell. So it was interesting to see because, obviously there's been some tension going back a long ways, really, between Alberta and Ottawa. I mean, having worked in Jason Kenney's government, I don't know if that gives you any kind of additional insight on some of these issues, or I don't know, are you potentially a bit of a bridge in trying to foster conversation?
I mean, I'm always happy to be. I do talk to my conservative colleagues all of the time, right? I'm not like the most partisan guy. I'm just not interested in being that. That's not really why I decided to do these things. And one of the benefits of doing what I did, which was run communications for Premier Notley and then go ahead and do it for two budgets for Premier Kenney as well, is you learn how to speak both of those languages to a certain extent, right? You understand what keeps them up at night, their concerns, what's driving them, the constituents that they are most feeling anxiety about and most likely to hear about. And, in my world, which has largely been communications, that's always really useful for then knowing how you're supposed to talk about an issue. And so I think that's certainly a role that I hope to play, like being a bit of a bridge between more, historically intransigent forces in Alberta and, historically confused Ottawa, like saying, why is this conversation going so badly, right? And being able to bring some of that insight. But, I think I think that the guy who's really leading that is the Prime Minister. Like, he is an Albertan too, and he understands a lot of those beats. And he is very mindful of the things that keep us up at night as a province in a way that I don't think any Prime Minister, I think since Harper, has been, for sure. I know Harper was only there's only two in between there, but I certainly think that he brings a certain Alberta lens that no Liberal Prime Minister has ever had.
Yeah, it's certainly a different approach. I mean, that's for sure. There is that frustration. Alberta politics, and you've been around long enough, and you understand a lot of that. And we've seen since the election where, Alberta kind of voted one way, the rest of the country voted another. Some of that frustration is boiled over. We've got this sort of burgeoning kind of separatist movement, maybe a referendum at some point coming, who knows. You've kind of tackled this head on. You wrote a piece at CoreyHogan.ca sort of rebutting some of these separatist claims. Like, do you see it as like a responsibility of yours, almost like a patriotic duty to deal with this, speaking as an Albertan, as a Calgary MP too?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And it's a big part of my why, right? Like, when we talked about me sitting there in January and February saying, what is happening in the world? I'm not limiting it to outside of our borders, like as a country or even as a province. I was very concerned with some of the rhetoric, the way we were, maybe cozying up to Donald Trump. I get that. Like, I understand why, reasonable people can disagree as to the approach to dealing with the U.S. administration, but just some of the heightened rhetoric, some of the heightened, facilitation of separatist views, including, the changes to referendum language, those all weighed on me pretty heavily. And I mean, Alberta is a very interesting place. It's not, I think, as it sometimes comes off to the rest of the country. It's seen as like monolithic and almost a stereotype and a caricature, but it's not that. Like, Harry Chase, who was a Liberal MLA, he used to talk about there's two types of Albertans, and they overlap. They can be both too. There's gunslingers and there's barn builders. There's a lot of barn builders here too. And you mentioned it was a high watermark for the Liberals. Well, I don't know if people appreciate just how much of one. In Calgary, the Liberals got 37% of the vote, which is literally the most ever. Like, you go back to like when Calgary started having a seat federally, it's the most ever. And in the meantime, we are also seeing kind of an extreme, a separatist movement that is growing in intensity, if maybe not really size yet. It's still about 30%. It was when I was polling on this, when I worked for the government in the teens too. But yeah, I think I did see it as a bit of a duty to stand up and say, hold on, like, we don't need to all fall into these rhetorical traps. We can work together as a country. We're so fortunate to be Canadians. There is so much this country provides us. I'm an Albertan. Am I frustrated by Ottawa? Fuck yeah. Like, all the time, like, on a regular basis. And I include into my current job, right? But we're a family and we all are in this together, and we're all better for it, for being in this together. So I do see part of my role. And when you cast me back to that election night, when I was thinking about things a bit differently, is to say, there is a complexity to Alberta. Stop painting us with a flat brush. There is nuance. There is texture, and this is a really amazing place that I really want the rest of the country to understand better.
Well, it's funny because if the conversation is the future of the country, then it's conversation for everybody. And I think those that love this country and want to keep this country together are entitled to have a voice too. But It's funny though, the political dynamics of this, and almost like, well, you as a liberal, you're kind of preaching to the choir, and the separatists that don't really want to hear from you. So maybe, somehow you need to stay out of the debate, right? I mean, what do you make of some of those dynamics at play here?
I think about them a lot. And so you mentioned a piece that I wrote where I rebutted some of the arguments I'd heard that didn't kind of pass the sniff test for me, but I had seen repeated so many times. But, one of the things that I do, one of the things I have to do in this job is not swing at every pitch, not pick every fight. And some of it is because of those dynamics you're talking about. And, I want to make sure that I'm putting out there in ways that are additive arguments that help people, but other people will carry them too. And there are a lot of conservatives who love this country. Like I for sure do not want anybody out there listening to think that this is a liberal versus conservative issue in Alberta. The vast majority of Albertans are fiercely proud Canadians. And the majority of Albertans are conservative. So that a huge chunk of the conservative, like most of the conservatives, are fiercely proud Canadians too. And you've got people like Jason Kenney, who's stood up and been very passionate defender of the country. I have all the time in the world for Jason Kenney. I'm not sure I'm doing him any favors by saying that as a Liberal MP. Yeah. But I worked closely with him and I saw how smart and thoughtful he was. And, even if you disagree with him on a philosophical level, he's got a moral core that I just think we don't see enough of in politics these days. And there are going to be conservatives who carry that message about the importance of this country too. And so I want to make sure what I'm doing is additive. I want to work with anybody who loves this country. And I certainly want to hear people if they tell me I'm being deleterious, right? Not helpful to the conversation at certain points too.
Well, and maybe for you too, as being that conduit, because I think there are people out here who hope that the Prime Minister understands this, that, obviously there are things he could do that might exacerbate things here. And look, there are decisions he could make, steps he could take that I would think could ease a lot of the tension here and show Albertans that, this country can work for us and everybody, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and I think so. And, it's tricky, right? Because whenever you get into something that's just so big, like it's just such a challenge, you've got to think to yourself, how much of this is rhetoric and how much of this is real? And to be frank, there's a lot of both, right? Like, it is for sure true. It has been very difficult to build things in Alberta for the past 10 years. It is for sure true that we've created some economic uncertainty with some well-intentioned policies, but policies that have disproportionately affected Alberta, right? But it's also for sure true that oil production in Alberta went up 47% between 2015 and 2024. That Canadian oil and gas production overall went up 34% when globally it's only up 6%. Like, the industry is not dying. Has every action been great at stewarding the industry? No. And I think that we can see some good changes there, but we've got to dial it down and we've got to fix real problems, and we can't be living in grievance all of the time. We got to root it in like the facts if we're going to move forward here too.
Yeah, and I think that what's part of that story is the Trans Mountain Pipeline, and as difficult as it was to get that project over the line. I mean, it is something. In fairness, I mean, it has made a tremendous difference so far.
Yeah, it's very expensive, right? $30 billion. People sometimes whinge about battery plants in Ontario, but there's a lot of battery plants right here worth of investment. But I do want to say, like, I sort of understand the counter argument too. Like, it's so interesting because, of course, my job is to go to Ottawa and to represent Calgary, and I hear a lot of the other stuff. And sometimes you'll hear people say things like, "Well, we bought that pipeline. Why isn't that kind of perceived more?" And I have to remind people, yes, but that was after so many pipelines fell off the list. Like at one point, it looked like we were almost going to be building too many, frankly, right? Between Energy East and Northern Gateway and KXL, and of course Trans Mountain. And when Trans Mountain was the only one standing, and then it fell, it felt like it wasn't so much the federal government doing us a favor as the federal government cleaning up a mess. And people don't get credit for cleaning up a mess. That's a simple reality. So we got to get back to the facts and the rhetoric here. And I think we've just got to sort of acknowledge not everything that perceives good is great. Not everything that perceives bad is terrible. And we have to have real conversations if we want to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, moving forward, as mentioned, we'll wait these announcements on the major projects. We get the first signs of the industrial strategy here, and of course, there's the whole uncertainty of trade, right, that hangs
Yeah.
over us. And it's a fine line for the prime minister to walk in navigating all of this and representing Canada's interests, trying to get the best possible deal with the United States and fostering still, if we can, a positive relationship. I mean, I think the 51st state rhetoric stuff has kind of gone away, but
Yeah.
what's kind of the challenge facing Canada right now here, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that the last 6 months or more, geez, it's already September. I can't even believe
I
this.
know. It's crazy.
Let's call it the last 10 months.
Sure.
It has really, I think, opened our eyes as a country to maybe how exposed we were to one trading partner, how we were taking for granted relationships across the board, taking for granted economic growth even. Like, it's changed our view of ourselves, and it's been a bit of a sobering moment, frankly. There are some realities, though, and one of them is that to fundamentally address that, to have more trading relationships with Africa, with Europe, with Asia, you are going to have to build things, you are going to have to make connections, and that is going to take time. So I tend to think of it as almost a two-step process, right? Step one is we've got to manage the here and now. We've got to have as good of a deal as possible with the United States. We've got to continue to be good partners with, look, our friends, our family, our neighbors. The Americans are not they're also a complex people, right? And there's a lot going on down there, and we can't throw away a multi-century friendship because of perceptions of Donald Trump, right? So we got to give it a shot, and we've got to try our best there too. But we do need to start thinking about the long term and how we make ourselves not so exposed on that front. And that's step two. But on step one, I got to say, like, as much as anything, it's playing for a deal and it's playing for time. And Canada's doing pretty damn good on that front. We have 85% of our goods to the United States are not tariffed at all after the CUSMA exemptions. Our average rate of tariffing it's in the 5%. Like, I think it's 5.5 or something like that. I think in Europe it's 15.5. Like, we are, every day is a struggle. But I think we have to acknowledge as a country, we're doing pretty good in this struggle right now. And we are getting ourselves the time and the space to make the bigger changes, which is part of why you're seeing the prime minister in Europe so much. It's part of why you're seeing all of these Asian trade conversations. And of course, African trade right around the corner. We'll be looking at ways to strengthen that too, I have no doubt.
And then there's the budget. And it was interesting. You had a piece up at your website, a post on how to shrink a government department, right? And
yeah.
Because it might seem like an oxymoron to people when you hear the prime minister say this is going to be a budget of investment and austerity. But, there's some big picture things Canada needs to address. But there is probably a need to rein in spending or take a hard look at what's being spent. So I don't know. I mean, how does he go about doing that?
Yeah. And I mean, in like just simple to the point of lazy terms, it's the difference between your monthly budget and buying a house. Right? Yes, the buying the house will be incredibly expensive, but it doesn't on a monthly basis cause you all of those challenges, assuming you paid cash, right? Like if you're not having a mortgage. So what the prime minister wants to do is change the spending profile. So we're spending less on the day to day, or at least like bending the curve on the growth of that, if nothing else. And we're spending more on things that are hard assets that grow our economy and ultimately grow our tax base, although I always kind of personally hate it when that gets overstated, right? But allows us to strengthen ourselves as a country and push ourselves forward. Because I think you can, like you build a new port, and it's not gone, right? It's something that you then enjoy and benefit for years and years and years. Now, if you're paying for policy development work I'll just pick on NRCan because it's my department, right? It's not gone either, but it's an ongoing cost. You're going to pay every year for the person, right? If you're expanding the size. So in the piece I wrote, the thing I really wanted to underline, and I think it's worth saying, is there are good ways and there are bad ways to approach austerity in government. And the bad way is what I will call the Elon Musk approach. It's the Doge approach. It's you go in there, you kind of indiscriminately cut, you arbitrarily say, I don't understand this, so it's gone. And then you put up a website that says, look at all the money I saved, right? Yeah. That's not ideal. What you want to do is you want to have a plan. You want to sit down and say, okay, what programs do we have? What programs are coming up to sunset? Are there combinations that are possible? What's the best return on investment? And then a question that I'm afraid I don't think we were asking ourselves enough in the last bit. Can we afford this? I think you would be really hard pressed to find a government program that doesn't have value and worth and even positively positive return on investment. But can we afford it has to be a question government asks as well, or else government becomes unsustainable. And then you crash into the Elon Musk style of cuts. So one of the things the Prime Minister is trying to do is make sure that we are making our operations as efficient as possible. It's not a left-wing or a right-wing idea. If you believe in government, you should believe in government being sustainable and doing whatever you can to get the most out of public dollars.
Well, to speak to that question, I guess, whether we'll see the parties working together. And I mean, we're certainly, I think, set for an interesting fall session as Pierre Poilievre is back in the House. Like, what have you made a question period so far, first of all, than being on it on the inside? I guess it'll be interesting this fall, won't it?
I hate question period. I don't know how any reasonable adult could like question period. Let me summarize it for anybody who has given themselves the charity of never watching it. The opposition asks the same question 10 times in 10 shitty ways, and we don't answer it 10 times, usually in 10 shitty ways. And then we all clap like mad seals, like we're so thrilled with whatever our side says, and then we go on with our lives. And look, it's because everybody is seeking those clips. They can put it on social media. People don't even look at each other or the speaker. They look at the cameras. They look at the TV cameras and they try to get that clip, and they try to get it in their voice so they can send it to their constituents. And that's the theater of politics, but the theater is not serving us very well. We need to think about how we can have more productive conversations. Certainly my fear is in the fall, it's just going to get more theatric, not less, with the return of Pierre Poilievre, which is not a judgment on him specifically. He's the leader and he's now there and, curtains up, the theater on, right? So, I'm not looking forward to that if that's how it turns out. But I do think that Canadians are in a moment where they want to see more serious politics. So I'm hoping that starts moderating our behavior. Let me put it that way. I really hope so. And I really hope Canadians hold us to account to a higher standard, like a more adult standard, because we work for all of you. And I don't know, if I had employees that work the way we act for 1 hour every day in QP, I don't know. We'd be having some pretty serious conversations. I guess that's what I would say.
Well, yeah, it is a big moment. Obviously, some big decisions lie ahead here for the government on the budget, trade, and elsewhere. So looking forward to seeing it all of it unfold. And as mentioned, much more from you at CoreyHogan.ca. Corey, thanks so much for joining us. You really do appreciate this.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, our thanks once again to Corey Hogan, of course, Liberal Member of Parliament for Calgary Confederation, Parliamentary Secretary as well to the Minister of Energy and Natural Resources, and some interesting perspective from him on the state of federal politics, some of the big challenges the government's facing, and obviously for him, the responsibility and the pressure he's facing, being that lone Liberal MP from Calgary, one of only two Liberal MPs in the province of Alberta, and trying to be a voice for his constituents and maybe more broadly for this province, but also being, a Liberal team player. And hopefully from Alberta's perspective, there doesn't have to be a big conflict there, that the Liberal government can deliver on policies and decisions that are good for Alberta and good for the country. And I think that's part of the test the government's facing. Yeah, it is a pivotal moment for the country and the economic pressure we're facing, everything going on with trade, what's going to be in this budget and some big decisions to be made there, in addition to, of course, major projects. And yeah, I think this is the test for the Carney government, where the rhetoric's been there, the promises have been there, and now we're all waiting to see what that follow through looks like. So you get the Liberal caucus meeting this week in Edmonton. You've got Parliament resuming on September 15th. And so, yes, I think a pretty consequential fall session of Parliament, one the Canadians, and certainly I think Albertans will be watching very closely. So again, our thanks to Corey Hogan. You can read more from him at CoreyHogan.ca. And of course, you can find more from us at Alberta.readtheline.ca. So check us out there. Make sure you subscribe and get all our updates on what's going on. And of course, much more at readtheline.ca. We will be back as well next week with a new edition, a new episode of the Line Alberta Podcast. So we'll talk to you then next week. My name is Rob Breakenridge. Take care.